Okay, let me introduce you to Phil Duffy. Some of you may know Phil, based in the south of France, has spoken for IMS a few times over the years.
I have.
And it's always nice to work with you. Thank you for coming over from France, much appreciated. And Phil is going to talk to you about valuations. It's an interesting subject, valuations, and always amazes me with what you do is you're looking at some pretty meaty yachts, and they're quite expensive. Yeah. And if you're 10% out on a valuation on a £60 million yacht, hello, absolutely, you've got a problem.
The same principles apply.
Same principles apply. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Phil.
So a quick background. I spent about 40 years in the yachting industry. That makes me older than I look, I hope. But last 30 years, mostly in the superyacht industry. I'm using superyacht instead of large yacht. I know most surveyors use the term large yacht. Superyacht gets used in the world that I live in, so I tend to use it all the time. But I'd like to thank Mike first for dropping me in it, basically. This is like coming on stage as a stand-up comedian after someone's brought the house down, isn't it? It's not the most exciting subject, but I'll try and make it interesting. But just to keep people awake, this whole valuation of yachts of all sizes is a very, very misused income stream for a lot of surveyors. Right? It's usually just something tagged on the end of a report. So hopefully, at the end of it, you might have a better understanding of how you can increase your income. I have a company called Duffy Marine in the south of France and in London. We focus on valuations a lot of the time, and we do consultations on transactional sales of boats, sales of large yachts, working with lawyers, etc. I'm also an expert witness when it comes to yacht valuations, when it comes to litigation, which I'll touch on towards the end. But what I would like to look at in the following half an hour or so is who's buying the evaluations, basically, who's wanting the valuations. Ship versus yachts, the standard, IVSSC, types of valuations, depreciation, market intelligence, challenging valuations, and the reporting. So the client base for valuations, yachts, owners and sellers. I'm talking both small yachts and large yachts here. A lot of the owners will be given a value to put his boat on the market, and he doesn't believe it. So they'll engage a surveyor or a value to give him a objective opinion of what it is. Brokers, which we'll touch on a bit later on, the broker's approach to valuation. Lenders, the banks, there's about 5 or 6 large banks that are still Societe Generale, there's a few more large ones that are still lending. Morgan Stanley are lending. Insurance companies, as most surveyors know, are C&Vs, what people normally come across. Law firms, legal and tax advisors. It's worth just touching, I think, on ship versus yachts. I just go back a little bit to why I started getting interested in this was around 2007, 2008. I was working as a technical owner's rep on a new construction in an Italian shipyard. And about halfway through the build, 18 months into the build, I received an email from the owner's lawyers saying they were sending a surveyor down from England to carry out a valuation on the yacht. Right. So this chap flies down to Pisa. He gets picked up in a nice car. He gets taken for a nice lunch. We had a walk through the yacht. He went to his hotel. The next morning, we met with the project management. We flew out. 10 days later, I got sent a report. But I distinctly remember sitting, having had a difficult day, to say the least, in this Italian shipyard with the class surveyor I was contesting the pressure test on the tanks. And it was hot. And I was sat there in my overalls, looking at my phone. And I got pinged the invoice from this chap, absolutely by mistake. Right? So I opened it up, and it was around about £7,000 sterling plus all expenses. So being a Yorkshire lad, I thought, well, so this is good money if you can get hold of it. So I began to look how does this work? Because then I started looking at other reports, other surveyors' reports. And although they were technically described the boat or the ship or whatever it was, it's incredibly subjective when it came to where is this figure coming from at the bottom. So I started digging deeper and how does this come about? And I did a course in ships evaluation in the end, so I could value a ship if you like. Not that they would let me, but I could value a ship. Now, scratching my head, there's got to be a more pragmatic, logical, methodical way of doing this. Because as surveyors, we approach things in a practical way. We try to get a conclusion based on our experience, knowledge, qualification, etc. And then I was looking at these figures, which were just a lot of the time 3 pages of verbiage, and then this thing tagged on the bottom. So I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and I ended up doing what I'm doing. So if we look at ship versus yacht, the average commercial ship's 20 years old, 25. It's a cycle of about 5-year class surveys. Bearing in mind that a ship has to keep working, so that's a lot of work. Depends on what type of ship it is. It's true, and the Baltic Exchange is one example. There's a few other exchanges as well, but the Baltic Exchange is one of the big ones. Every single day they trade ships, ship brokers trade them backwards and forwards. It's usually done on, well, it's always done 9 times out of 10 on a database, and an algorithm is used to calculate it out. Companies like Vessel Value, Kellogg's, Clarksons, etc., they're valuing ships all the time. So to come up with the algorithm for a ship, you would punch in its type. It's an LNG, or it's a bulk carrier, or it's an oil tanker. Then its age. It's 15 years old, it's 10 years old. Its residual earning capacity, based on 25 years. You've got 10 years to carry this about. You could calculate that out. Then you look at the market demand, what's happening that particular day, because that's fed into the database every day. And then you punch in the scrap value. Usually the spot price of scrap in Bangladesh when it's dragged up the beach or something like that. So you have the scrap value. So when we come to a yacht, we've got a problem if we try to use an algorithm like this. The average age of a yacht, there's no such thing, is there? We get classics and we get all sorts of things. Has it been refitted? Some refits, cut them in half and stick a bit in the middle. It doesn't resemble anything like it was originally designed as. They're traded by brokers and private owners, so there's no basis for it. It's just made up. And then emotional purchase. You'll get a very wealthy character, or even a not so wealthy person will buy a yacht on an emotional purpose. It's beautiful. I want that boat. You don't do that with a tanker. There's no emotional purchasing. So if we try to plug that in, that algorithm in, to come up with a yacht value, type, is it a sailboat? Is it a motorboat? Has it got 1 engine, 2 engines? The type's vast. Its age could be 1 year old. It could be 30. My own boat is 1972. It's 50 years old. Has it got any residual earning capacity? That's a possibility with the charter yacht. You could say if it was kept in charter for the next 5 years and it's earning X per charter and it's doing 10 weeks a year, you could punch that in. The market demand, that's vastly different from the shipping industry to the yachting industry. It's extremely volatile, the yacht market, day by day. And its scrap value, what's it made out of? You have to I mean, the big problem at the moment throughout Europe is getting rid of plastic boats, isn't it? How do we get rid of plastic boats? So, Vessel Value, for instance, if you noticed about 2.5 years ago, they decided to get it into the large yacht business. And they tried and they tried and tried. And the chap that was involved in trying to do it, it's impossible to do. So they, after about 1.5 years, something like that, they said, no, we can't do this. The algorithm doesn't work. Now, this I've used throughout my entire surveying career of 20 or 30 years in accordance with. If I get stuck on something, I look for a code of practice, a class rule, a ISO that I can relate to, and then I can put in the report. This is not satisfactory in accordance with class rules, so and so, or the ISO. But when it comes to valuations, is there a standard? Well, there is, actually. The International Valuation Standards Council is a non-profit organization which produces standards for valuations. That is asset valuations. So it could apply to a house, it could apply to a business, it could apply to some jewelry. It's a way of using a standard. Just like you would use it for class surveying or for any other ISA. And this is the one that's should be aware of. Fair market value. Right? All surveyors write this in. Fair market value, in my opinion, is X. But there's a standard for that. The fair market value is the price at which the property would change hands between a willing buyer and a willing seller, neither being under any compulsion to buy or sell and both having reasonable knowledge of relevant facts. That's changed over the last few years. It was a bit wordier than that in the past. But what he's saying is, you two agreed to buy it, you know all about it, so that's what I'm basing my valuation on. It's not a dispute. This is a fair market value. That should be in every single surveyor's report if he does a valuation. Now we've got bases of valuation. There's several bases of valuation that can be used. The most common one is this. This is the one that most surveyors use. Market comparable approach. This method looks at the prices of similar vessels that have recently been sold or listed. So most surveyors, they'll go along, do the job, inspect the boat, write the report out. When it comes to the valuation, they'll go on the internet, find another Sunseeker 43. How many? 4 of them. And they will go average out, and then I'll balance that against what condition the boat is. And I'll come up with it. There's nothing wrong with this method. There's a couple of pitfalls. Are the broker's listings accurate that you're looking at? That's an issue. You could say that if I look at 3 and it levels out and everybody's got it somewhere reasonable, then that is one way of looking at it. But there's a couple of pitfalls. One is, how long has that ad been up? How long has it been listed for? Could have come out last week. It could be a year old, the ad you're looking at. Unless you pay for one of the platforms, like IBI or one of the other platforms, or Yacht World or Wizard, you won't be able to find how long that ad has been actually listed for. So you're guessing at the best of times. Brokers are under a lot of pressure, just like everybody else in this industry are. If they get an order comes up to them and said, I think it's worth 50,000, and the broker knows it's not worth 50,000, he's not going to go, no, go away, because he knows another broker is going to, I'll list it for you. So if I can get the 50,000, or I'll work on you to get a reduction in a few weeks' time. So it can be inflated at times. This approach, income-based approach, is based on the revenue the vessel is expected to generate. So if you have a coded vessel, or you have a charter vessel, what you need to actually do is to look, well, let's just say it's in the UK. So it's going to be working 10, 12 weeks in the summer. How much is it chartering for? X amount of money. But then the problem with that is you have to offset that against the extra costs of running a coded vessel. And more traffic on board, the more maintenance required to keep it going. But some of the yachts that we deal with, I mean, they're chartering for 500,000, 1 million, 2 million a week. So to ignore that 10 weeks, it's a big chunk of income to ignore. So then when it comes to making a valuation on a large charter yacht, you have to get a balance between the comparable approach or the and some of the income approach at the same time. Cost approach. You won't normally come across this, but it's worth looking at. If you're going to replace it, if you had a standard Sunseeker or Princess yacht or a Swan 47 or something, you could probably call the yard up and say, how much is it going to cost to replace that? But some of the larger yachts are one-offs. They're not going to give you that information. You're just not going to get access to it. If you called up Benetti Shipyard and said, how much is it going to cost? How much is a Benetti 43 worth? They will go, what? It's a deal. You have to come to the yard and we'll do a deal. So that can be a really difficult thing to do. And it takes a lot of experience and a lot of contacts in the industry to be able to find out a base value to work on. So a conditional valuation is what most small craft surveyors cut their teeth on. I know I did 30 odd years ago. So it's a comprehensive valuation based on the yacht's physical condition. So you're actually seeing it. You're saying, I've seen it with my own eyes. I know the condition of the boat. I know how many hours are on the engine. I know its maintenance record, etc., etc., etc. And I've looked on the internet. I've looked around, and I've asked the brokers I know, and you'll come up with quite a good valuation in there. But you have to physically go and look at the vessel. But again, when you come up with a valuation, you need to balance it against, if you don't know the maintenance records, you don't know when the engine was last serviced, etc., etc. That has to be part of your valuation. So it's a detailed report by a professional surveyor. It's balanced against market research. Now, this one is what most surveyors don't come across. And I would say that this is at least 60% of my work, desktop valuation. And it's exactly what it says. I don't leave my desk on the computer. I can sit here and do one now. Okay, but it requires certain information. It's based on available data. So if you don't have, I mean, I have contracts with some of the large lenders, and I have to sign non-disclosure agreements, etc. And an email will come through saying, can you give me a desktop valuation on this vessel? And it'll give me a link to that vessel and I'll have a look at it. And then I've got a standard checklist. I need this information. Goes off. Most of the lenders are very experienced guys. They do this all the time. They know exactly what I need and send it. But if one of those things, like the latest class survey is not in there, or the maintenance records are not in there, I can't do it. But the temptation is to say, I'll just, yeah, I'm sure it's all right. But the problem is that you just dug yourself a massive hole. You have to have the nerve to say, this is easy money. I'm getting paid really well for doing it, but I'm not going to do it. You have to tell the lender or whoever the client is, you need a surveyor. I need a survey report. And that's all I ever do. I say, I need a survey report, an inspection, to find out this information. Or get them to me. So it's based on the yacht's specifications, historical data, and market trends. Provides an estimate of the value without physical inspection. Conducted remotely using databases, documents, and appraisals, etc. What I'll do with Mike later on, when I get back, I will send Mike a couple of templates with prompts on them. A desktop template and a large yacht CMV template. There'll be blank templates with some prompts on them. Mike can, if anybody wants one, Mike can. Depreciation. This is a difficult one. It's an age initial value drop. It's maintenance condition. Is it being future-proofed? Technology and design obsolescence. And the brand and build quality. Everybody in this business knows that a Southern European boat versus a Northern European boat, there's going to be a big price difference simply because of the quality. It depends what you buy. If it takes 3 years to build a 50-meter vessel in Italy, but it takes 5 years to build it in Germany or Holland, it's there staring you in the face, the build quality. So that has to be taken into account. So market demands and trends, usage, how many miles has it got on, location and accessibility. If you've got I just recently had one that was in the back end of nowhere in Turkey. And I was balancing that against if it was located in an easily accessible port, because they're going to be the same, because they're not going to get to it. You have to look at the market and is it accessible to it? So what you do in that case, if you say the boat is in the middle of nowhere, you would put two prices in. If this vessel was based in the UK, it would be X. I consider it, in my opinion, to be rather lower in value because it's based somewhere else. Depreciation. If you look at the depreciation, it's exactly like a car. If you bought a brand new car and drove it off the lot, you I'm up 10%, at least straight away. But some of the production boats, smaller craft production boats, will drop 20%, simply because you can replace it within a year. If you can replace it within a year, I usually work around 20% drop in the first year. But again, if it takes longer to build up, it's not accessible, you can't get it, the depreciation might be less. Does that make sense? So it's a rapid value drop because it's pre-owned. Year 4 to 10, it's a slow decline. I usually work around 7%, 7.5% over that period of time, 4 to 10 years. But it depends on, has it been upgraded? Has it had new technology on board? I mean, the big thing was people immediately started putting Starlink on board. So you see domes disappearing all over the place. Now you don't see domes. You just see 4 or 5 Starlinks dotted around the 50 meters. Year 11 to 20, 3 to 5% annual depreciation. It's a gradual decline, but that's tied to, have you got the maintenance records? Has it been, how the engines follow the manufacturer's schedule for maintenance records, etc.? Has it had any refits? Year 20, it can either go stagnant, it is what it is, it's 20 years old, or it can start to appreciate. Strangely enough, if they're scarce, rare, custom-built vessels designed from a shipyard, it will hold its value. One vessel, strangely enough, that I valued 5 years in a row. It's a 45-meter built by a Dutch yard, and it's absolutely immaculate. The owner spent, he could have bought himself 3 more boats, but he spent more money on it. So each time I do the valuation on it, it stays the same. Depends on the design craftsmanship, the same as a Ferrari or a Ford Escort. That is the most important part thing when it's going to appreciate. This is a strange one because in my world, I said to one broker who disagreed with my valuation on a large yacht on a 50-meter. He said it was owned by sons. I won't tell you the name of the person, but a very high-profile celebrity. And I said, all celebrities have got bloody yachts, you know. So, yeah. Find me one who hasn't, you know. But having said that, they do put on the market. The brokers do pump them up on the market, and they say it was owned by a son. So.
David Bowie's yacht came up for sale last year.
Yeah.
It's a massive Bowie fan. I'd love to have bought it. Just because it was owned by David Bowie. I didn't know it was more than that.
As an aside to that, my son has a film company, video company. They film yachts and a high-end real estate in the south of France. And he recently did, last week actually, they did a shoot of Julian London's apartment on Cap d'Agde in the south of France. Anyway, he said, I was sat and having a drink with him. He gets his phone and he says, that. I said, it's great. It's full of, it's memorabilia in there, and it's pianos. And everything. I said, stop a minute. It's empty. And there's this drum head. And it was the drum head from Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, the album cover sat in the corner. And I said to him, he's 22. I said, do you know what that is?
Not a clue.
So, limited new build availability. This is an interesting one because over the last 5 years, the cost of a new build has gone up by 40%. So if you're, because of supply chain problems, etc., it's gone up by 40%. If you're a chap with a 30-meter yacht and your broker's saying, I want to buy a big new one because I made lots of money, he has got this yacht, and now how is he needs to sell that and he wants to buy that. And he's aghast at the vast difference between the two. And that is causing a big problem for the shipyards, for manufacturers. Yeah, how long you got to wait? Then you get people buying what they call interim boats. That's a big market, an interim boat. So I've got this boat, I'm going to put it on the market. Okay. And then I don't want it anymore. I want a new build. A new build is going to take 3 to 4 years to build. So the broker sells in what's called an interim boat. Has it got charter potential? Some of the big classic yachts, they will keep their value simply because they make so much money. Very busy on the market. So what you're actually selling and what you're actually valuing is a business, not the yacht. It could be a hotel, it could be any sort of a business. So we look at the running costs, because this is something else we have to take into account at times. I've just taken an example here of 45-meter, 20 million super yacht running costs 10 to 15% of total value. So it's going to cost him about 3 million a year to keep his boat running on the water. And this breaks down quite interestingly into crew salaries. It's usually the top end. That's what's costing the money. And then you've got maintenance and repairs. It's 10 to 15%. Depends on whether it's a charter boat, private boat, how much it's used, if it's a 2-season boat or a single-season boat. Insurance is 5%. Docking and marina fees can be up to, or down in the south of France now, you could be paying 10,000. Well, you're paying 10,000 for a mooring in some places. And you cannot get a berth for love nor money anywhere on the south coast of France, any sort of berth. Mine's 10.3 meters. And I'm having to ship it down to somewhere down at Boucheron, down to the west, to try to find a berth for it. Provisions and hospitality, miscellaneous such as internet customs, legal fees, etc. Reporting. I'm going to just run through click by click of contents of a report, just to look at it without spending too much time on it, because it depends on what do. I don't know if anybody else does, but I'm sure these days we all use templates. We have a cloud system. You click on it, whatever boat you're surveying, you click on it, pull it up. It's a template for a small motorboat, a small sailboat, a large sailboat, a small sailboat, a C&V, whatever we do, and we pull that up, and then you start typing
I
in.
suspect you're unusual in that. I'm not sure that's is that how you do this? You do?
Use a standard template. Yeah. T's and C's. Right. The difficulty is with T's and C's, terms and conditions. You have to be very clear about what you're actually doing, you know, and it has to be run past your PI provider, obviously. If you had, like we have, we pay a fortune PI every year. When it comes to valuations, I thought we could, 1 minute we could be valuing a vessel worth 100,000 or 50,000. Next is 100 million. So to get that range would be crazy. Certainly not going to the top end of it. So we have an agreement with the PI provider that we have a set figure. Anything above 25 million, I know these are just numbers, it's irrelevant. 25 million is that covers us. But if it's above 25 million, I have to contact them, send them the details of what we're doing it. We pay a premium for that one particular job. Then we drop back again. Because otherwise you would be paying the top end, in excess of 100 million, some of the vessels that we look at. Scope and limitations of your survey, or what you're actually doing. I'll look at it a little bit later on, but that should be in there. The purpose of your evaluation. What's it for? Is it an insurance? Is it a dispute? Is it for an owner's personal knowledge? You have to put the purpose of it in the first place. The basis of valuation you're using, if it's comparable, which most of the time it is, put that in there. Put the standard in there, that what you think fair market value is as a standard. That just says, look, I'm working off of this. I'm working out what this fair market value is. I haven't made it up. It's not subjective. It is an objective standard. The vessel's identity details, the general description. I always put in the general commentary on the builder. If it's Sunseeker, it's got Wikipedia. Cut and paste a bit. It's a Sunseeker. There's a commentary on the builder. Commentary on the, because they might not be in business anymore. I've seen that before. Commentary on the condition. This might be your own. You'll see annex something if it's, or see report above or whatever. If it's a desktop or something like that, and we've engaged a surveyor to do the job, there'll be a commentary on the survey, on the condition as reported by the, and in annex 1 by blah blah blah, whether Joe Blogs and Sons Limited, whatever. Market observations. The comparative analysis, if that's what you're using. I do see this in small craft reports as well, comparative analysis. If you put down in that area saying, having looked on the internet, vessels of a similar value, blah, 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 I think it's this. I think you need to put more effort into that. I think you need just, I use a table, right? 3 or 4 in a table, the boat at the top, the age of it, similar or same as. And I've just worked my way down, and at the bottom, there should be 4 boxes or 3 boxes, what you're using, which are the figures that you're comparing your vessel with. If you just put down, it's a bit like a math lesson at school. You come up with the right answer, but I was always getting show your work. Yeah.
So you put that in the report?
Yeah, put that in. I'll send a copy to Mike as a template. I know it takes a little bit more work, but at the same time, it does show that you're serious about what you're doing. It's not subjective, it's objective, because this is what I've researched. Statement of valuation, which we'll look at, depreciation, annual running costs, and a photographic record. When you say annual running costs, you would just put a strap line in there saying it's generally accepted with the industry that at the age of this vessel, the annual running costs are 5% of the value of the vessel. Same for depreciation. You would put a strap line in there saying depreciation on a heading. Underneath it, you would simply put it's generally accepted with a vessel of this age. Depreciation is about 7.7% per annum. You don't need to get into it any more than that. Now, I put this in, but it's just in the beginning of the report. I'll just say something like acting on behalf, under instructions from ex-client base, and then it will say acting impartially personally without prejudice or opinion as assigned a fair market value. All right, so the first bit, I'm telling you that I'm impartial. I'm not involved in it. There's no conflict of interest, and here's my market value. Here's my market value. What you're doing is you're standing out as being head and shoulders above everybody else, and you're a professional at what you do. There's a slight difference in the statement of honesty, integrity from a model report form. The model report form is used by expert witnesses from everything, from buildings to car crashes to anything that has to go to a court. We all use this same model form under Civil Procedures Direction 35, expert evidence. And the difference here is that it's quite an interesting one. I acknowledge that I must assist the court, but my duty to the court overrides any obligation to the party instructing me. So the obligations to the court are over and above what the guy's paying. That's what they're saying. And then blah, 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 blah. The opinions are expressed, this report, are based solely on my expertise and information available to me at the time of preparing the report. I also confirm that I'm aware that I must provide a truthful and accurate account of evaluation and assumptions made. This is a slightly different version of the statement of honesty and integrity. I mentioned earlier about the assumptions. When you're getting when you're writing a desktop report, you put these series of assumptions in at the beginning. No physical inspection of the vessel was conducted as part of this valuation. No warranty or guarantee is given or implied by, in this case, Duffy Marine, as the general condition of seaworthiness of the vessel. No warranty or guarantee is given or implied to the maintenance or condition of any main or ancillary machinery. No warranty or guarantee is being given, blah, 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 fittings on board the vessel, nor the nature or extent of the vessel's overall inventory. The valuation assumes that the vessel is good, well-maintained, seaworthy condition, and all statutory registered classification society requirements and conditions of insurance are met and are in date. The valuation assumes that the vessel has been maintained cosmetically to, in this case, a superyacht industry acceptable standard. Now, those assumptions, according to my PI provider, have to go in. What I'm basically saying, this is an opinion that I've come up with, but it's based on the information I've received, and I've got no guarantee that that information is true. So they're assumptions that we're using. Market intelligence resources. There will be a block in there saying market intelligence, because I'll give you an example. Around about 2008, we all know what happened in 2008. There's a friend of mine who's a broker, one of the biggest houses around, and he'd spent nearly a year putting together a deal with some Eastern European gentlemen for the purchase of 3 brand new 50-meter yachts. Brand new. A year, and on the Friday, they all agreed. Everybody agreed. The lawyers agreed, the transactional lawyers agreed, both parties agreed. Yeah, that's it. We've got the number on the Friday. Happy days. Monday morning, the stock market crashed. Lehman's Brothers went under, and the guys walked away. And that's what can happen. Look what recently happened with what's happening in America at the moment. It's an incredibly volatile market. There's 2 sides to it. I mean, we all know I missed Mike's intro, but Christina told me that you touched on the downturn in the UK market on boat sales, second-hand sales, etc., etc. And it's everywhere. And then you get what's happening in America with the sanctions, etc., etc. I expect this yacht market generally, first quarter of this year, to be really down, to be way down right across the board. And yet, when Trump got in, there was a lot of excitement, there still is, in Northern America. It got christened amongst the brokers the Trump bump. Right? It actually got called the Trump bump because everybody knew that the rich were going to get richer. They're going to be big tax breaks for the rich, and what they're going to do, they're going to start buying yachts. So there is a certain amount of that. I just spoke to a friend of mine who's a director of Burgess Yachts, and I said to him, "What's happening? What's going on?" I'll do this all the time to find out what's going on. And he said, "There's a lot of activity and interest in North America because these guys are going to get massive tax breaks." So how do we find out what's going on? You can be a boring geek like this, like me, and watch Bloomberg or something, CNN or whatever in the world all the time, and read the financial press, etc. But brokerage listings, yacht boats, Yacht World and soldboats.com. You've got Yacht Wizard. I don't know if anybody's used that. You have to pay to get onto it. Sold boats, all the brokers right across the board that have sold something, plug in the boat, the type of boat, the size of the boat, where it was located, what it was listed at, and what it sold for, and the date when it was sold. So if you go on to Sold Boats database, again, you have to pay. It's not a great deal of money. I hope Sold Boats is not listening, but if 3 or 4 of you get together, you can, right? You can say you're doing a condition evaluation, and it's a Sunseeker 50 or whatever it is. You just simply go in under that database, put Sunseeker 50. You plug in the year from to, because you want something around. You then put in maybe a price range, and then you press the button, and you get a big list of boats that were sold, when they were sold, and what price they were sold. So that's a good resource. Again, you have to pay for it.
I think in the sub 24 meters,
yeah,
that data is becoming less and less reliable. Two, one, people aren't putting in the actual. The second, the Yacht World ran their price up about tenfold, and most of the smaller brokers now.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's only really in Casper.
Yeah. I know Yacht World has put the prices up so much over there. But they own just about everything Yacht World these days. Everything's on Yacht World. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, now
yeah, but if you're a broker and you want to sell something, what are you going to do? You want the biggest, widest market. So,
I think anyway,
I don't know.
It's reduced.
Yeah.
Well, there's the Yacht Marketplace.com.
There's a few things. There's IBA News. There's international.
It was Yacht World almost 90%. Now, I can think of several in hand. Just don't use it. Why? Hopefully,
yeah.
They said their bills would go from 40 to 85. Sorry, 4,000 to 85,000.
Really?
Anyway, so I think just beware of the data. Something global.
It's a research base. So you pay a little bit, and then you put in, you want a report for 2023 on the mining industry in South Africa. It's a database. Individual brokers I know there's usually an uneasy truce between brokers and surveyors in the small under 24 meter world. I make friends with brokers all the time because I want to know what's going on. So I put this in market intelligence analysis. What I normally do is I'll put a paragraph, in my opinion, what's happening with the market from what I know or what I've gleaned and what's happening at a particular time. I'll try and back that up with, just go on the internet if you could, Superyacht. This is from Superyacht Times, a source. These are the 2002, blah, 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 2021. It gives about the COVID-19 pandemic, etc. So it's given an overall view from Superyacht Times of what their opinion of the market is or its projected to be. So to back up what I think, I usually put 1 or 2 of these resources in there, but I always put the resource at the bottom, make sure I've attributed to where it came from. So looking at the legal risks in yacht valuation. Misrepresentation of a yacht's condition, inaccurate reporting. It can happen. Incorrect market demand. The trouble is, if you don't try and be as accurate as you possibly can, you can get tripped up. I hate to look at what people's T's and C's are and what their PI says. But a lot of the things you think is a waiver that's covered you is merely it's a roadblock put up by the underwriters. And that if it actually got to litigation and a lawyer got his hands on it, he would knock them down one by one based on common law and normal legal practices. They're just a lot of the time they're roadblocks, and it's worth digging and looking at what you're actually really covered for, what you're not covered for. Failure to account for liens or debts. You can either just say, this does not include, I've got no idea. But you can't say, give a valuation without taking that into account. If you don't know, you don't know. If you've got no access to it, you need to write it in that you don't know and you've got no access. Non-compliance with laws, not following international maritime laws or regulations. Selling a coded vessel, valuing a coded vessel that's no longer coded, or a vessel that's out of class. I had a situation where I was filling the report in and it said it was in class. So when I went on the RENA database, looked the vessel up, it had missed 2 annuals and been removed from the database. In actual fact, it wasn't in class anymore. But if I had taken that as verbatim, it's in class. It doesn't mean anything is in class. It only means in class it's up to date with the surveys. Incorrect valuation methods, inconsistent. If it's comparable, use comparable. If you're going to use a basis of 2, if there's a chart about and you use comparables with comparables, you have to take into account the chart about's income. Intellectual property issues, custom designs or pictures tied to the yacht. That's a difficult one. That's a tricky one. But, if it has a touch and go helicopter pad and you ignored it, for instance, you just thought it was a big wide foredeck, right? And you didn't put it in your report, and then you've missed out. You've knocked its valuation back. Misunderstand the ownership structure. This doesn't really kind of a normal area of a surveyor. It's worth thinking about. If it's owned by a Cayman Islands company or Isle of Man's company, it's owned by a individual owner. Who's the beneficial owner, etc. You can trip up when you come up with the evaluation, because under what structure it's owned under, what's its tax implications? Is there any other implications involved in it? What's the loan? I mean, the Malta lease deal is 6% VAT, TVA in the same in Europe. But in other parts of the world, it's 20%. But you have to take up a Malta lease deal. So you need to get a copy. If it has a Malta lease deal, you need to see there's a Malta lease deal. Disputes, I've done quite a few over the years, at least, in inheritance cases. It's great if you're being engaged by an arbitration lawyer. In other words, you sat the 2 parties down and said, we need to come to an agreement. We'll get an independent valuer. Do you agree to this chap? Yeah, we agree to him. Whatever he comes up with, we agree with. If they engage 2 separate valuers, he comes up with X and I come up with B, they're going to start again. The whole thing's going to start again. Unless we both bang on, we've both got the same number, which is unlikely. I've got a black thing in front of my screen. What's the next one? Yeah, tax registration or import duties. This is a nightmare in the south of France. The vessels coming in have been sold. I'm trying to prove it's had tax paid, especially coming from Britain and backwards and forwards. The brokers have to contact the douane, and then they have to get, if they want to sell it and nullify the tax, they have to get a certificate saying it's something. And it goes backwards and forwards. So if you consider there's 21 or 20% tax on a vessel, and you miss it, and it either paid or it's not being paid, there's a big deal. It's a lot of money involved. Insurance valuation conflicts. I don't know about anybody else, but insurance companies are usually quite conservative with their figures, what they think it's worth. I don't deal with, for instance, an agreed value between the insurance company says, how do you think it's worth? And he says, it's worth 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000. Okay, and the insurance company says, that's an agreed value. Cost you that in the premium. And if the guy pays it, that's an agreed value. And then that's what they'll pay out if he loses his boat. If it's a standard advocates a commission evaluation and give me a number. We'll use the surveyor's figures. We'll base it on that. That's a different thing. So appraisers' qualifications and conflict of interest. Appraisers' qualifications. There's no such thing really. It's experience. But the main pivotal point of this is that if you've never carried out a valuation or a survey on a 50-meter yacht, most of the stuff's been under 24 meters, and you go ahead and do it, you're going to be in trouble. If something happens, you're going to be in serious trouble. First of all, your PI will be void, because if you look at your PI, you're restricted to that. And the second thing is that in the contract, of these contracts, it will say the value of the surveyor, normal practice is vessels of this size or value. So you could get into trouble. Just check with your PI, can I do this? See if you can do it. Statement of valuation, I'll just go through this. This is what's going to be at the end of your report, taking into account all the above data from consideration of reliability, the extent of the necessary adjustments, condition of the vessel. As reported, it could be, then I would go on to say, as reported from information received from X, if it's a desktop. If it's a condition report, it could be, I've engaged a surveyor and he sent me his report through and I've attached it. It is the undersigned valuer's opinion, certifies, certificates. A certificate implies that you've been certified to do it. That's the problem with issuing a certificate. And I do see that. I certify this to be. Well, this is a certificate of valuation. But that implies that the person giving the certification is certified. And there's no means of certifying it. So it should be an opinion. That's in my opinion, right? Estimated, some people say in the region of, I don't think that's very professional, should be estimated. At or between, it's okay to give a high and low, certainly on something like a one-off bill. I've had one where it was either 50 million or 40 million, because it was a completely one-off bill. And at the high end was, you could get 50 for it, and the low end you could get 40 for it. That's the best I could do.
That's quite useful where an owner or somebody's putting pressure on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah. Well, between X and Y, and then the insurance will take the low number.
Of course they will, every time. Yeah, the insurance will take the low number. And he's happy because he thinks, well, I think it's... It might work. So this is another thing that we get involved with, and I get involved with, liquidation for sale value. There's 60%, normally you work on 60% of what your fair market value figure was when you came up with it. But you have to put provisos in there. As applied as a reserve option, and if it's sold with no reserve, or as is where is, it could be a lot lower. So a waiver. The above figure relates to the opinion of the fair market value as of the date stated. This is vitally important if you've got a trump bump and something happens the next day, because it only relates to that, what you did, and you have to put that date in. Some guys put time in at 2 o'clock if you want to be really accurate. So we're not taken to apply to any other date. No assurance can be given that such a valuation could be sustainable or is realizable in an actual transaction. You've got to remember, you're not advising how much anybody should pay for it. You're saying this is the fair market value. And the two people have a negotiation, I'll buy it for this and sell it for this, and they come up with a different number than you can. What you're saying is this is the fair market value. So challenging valuations, a negative value. This means it's going to be cost more to scrap it or take it away than it is that it's actually going to be worth.
See many of those?
Now and again. Now and again. We get engaged now and again to go and look at something, and then we'll come out and say, the person who engaged us thought it was worth X, and he come up and said, well, hang on, by the time you've done this and done that, engines are short, you have to replace the engines. Just recently, we did a valuation on a multi-yacht built in the 60s, old classic. And I came up with a valuation, and the owner didn't like it. It was about 50% less than I thought it was going to be. And he said, but I've just had they replaced nearly 40 to 50% of the shell plate on the whole bottom because it was rotten. And then he said to me, well, we've spent all this €1 million doing the bottom. I said, well, the fact that the whole bottom's not leaking is a given. It's a vessel. It's not, it doesn't add value to it that you don't leak. Projects, these are very to be wary of. I've got a project. I want to raise finance against it. So he goes to the bank or the lender and says, I want to finish my project. I want to borrow 50,000 or something to finish my project. So you get asked to do a valuation. But his project, what he wants it to be, what it turns out to be, could be a different thing altogether. Again, it goes back to splitting. Sorry, what's your name? What Guy said was quite correct. In this situation, you can do the same thing. It's worth X now in its present state. Given the projected plans, etc., the rest of it could be worth this in the future. You could do something like that with a project. Partial near construction or refit. Partial near construction is a difficult one. You get shipyards where you got large vessels that are halfway through a build. The guy defaults on it, so he's not paying anymore. Shipyard under the terms of their contract will take the vessel back, but they have to sell it. Someone wants to buy it. They want to get a loan against it. They want to borrow money to buy it. So the value comes along, and there you are with a half-built boat. But you've got a list of things that are going to go on, have been paid for, something haven't been paid for, something have been ordered, some are owners' purchases sometime in the future. You don't know. So you have to get involvement in the shipyard. You have to say, I can do this, but I need the shipyard records. I need to know what the pricing is and what everything is, etc. You can do it. Auctions, we mentioned that earlier. And as is where is. You get situations where a vessel is advertised as is where is, so it's sat on the dock. You're not allowed a survey. It's for sale. So somebody wants to buy it as is where is, no survey. You're not allowed a survey as is where is. So I always tell anybody who contacts us about as is where is to say, go and get a survey. Go back to the guy and say, I've got some money. I'm going to buy the damn thing, but I want a survey, and I'm paying for the survey. The buyer pays for the survey. I said, and if he says no, don't buy it, because it's a far worse deal than you're thinking of. I have done as is where is, boats, but that's what I tell clients to do. Go back and say, I've got the money, I want to buy the boat, but I want a survey. Even if it's just no sea trunk, if it's just a lift, if no engines on it or something, and I want to look at the whole bottom, I want to haul out. That's what you should tell the client. This is an interesting one. I put this up here because it's in public record. This is Axioma. It was on the BBC News. It was arrested under the Russian situation. It was tied up in Gibraltar. The Gibraltar marshals put it up for a closed auction. I was engaged by a client to give a valuation. Each valuation potential client could bring a valuer or a surveyor on board for 2 hours. So we had a 2-hour walkthrough. And you have to come up with what you thought it would be, tell your client, yeah, they took it, accepted it, or made his own numbers up, sealed the bid, put them in. So I went down there with my engineer surveyor. Off we went to Jib, and the engineer, Bruce, who was in Merchant Navy, was a real old hand, last one, been around for years. He said, I know the engineer on there. We went on board. He disappeared down to the engine room to find out what's, maybe these guys speak. They may as well be in the Freemasons for them to start talking to each other. So I left him down there. And I went to the bridge and started going through the paperwork, talked to the captain, had a walk about. We got off. I spoke to my guy. I met with the client who just flown in on his private jet. He could have a buyer's walkthrough, but it had to be something. I met with him. I told him what I thought, top of my head. I said, I need to write something down, but it's going to take a while to write it down. And he said, what do you think? So I gave him a number. And I was pretty well on the mark. I wasn't far off the mark. But I knew that this had been about 18 months or less, 14, 15 months previously, had been valued by big UK survey company. And it had been valued in the mid-70 million a year previously. So I knew some of the problems with the boat as well from having talked. So it was an interesting exercise. And it went to a Turkish chap. We took it to Turkey. After the Admiralty Marshals had taken their fees and the broker had taken his fees, acting on behalf of the Admiralty Marshal. So, the role of an expert witness in a valuation dispute. I put this in just for the sake of it.
I thought there was an end to that.
Hey?
I thought there was an end.
No. Well, there is, but I can't say. You were quite right, and then he did say it. But Valuation analysis. Okay, this is the role of an expert witness. I'll just run through it quickly. Prepares a report, testimony, and this is for the court. This is why there's a misunderstanding that someone can engage an expert. You can engage an expert witness, but if you put your testimony into a court or into arbitration, you're representing the court. You're giving information to the court. Clarifies discrepancies or challenges raised by the opposing side. There will be another valuer. You get to get his report, you get to see, and he gets to see yours. Both sides see each other's. Impact on the case outcome. Helps available or discredit valuation claims. So once you've done your job, to the court, it's up to the court to decide whether or not it was a correct valuation. This happens all the time. Some big cases when there's been incorrect valuations, wrong valuations, basically. And somebody's challenged the valuation. And there's some Isle of Man TVA. There's a big one in the Isle of Man last year when vessel was valued for 250 million. The Isle of Man decided they want their TVA VAT for their 260 million, and it was challenged, and it was found out that it was actually owned by a Montenegro company. So when the trace went down, it was owned by a company in Montenegro. So there was no right to TVA for the Isle of Man. There's a bit more information in this. If you look online at the IMS, I wrote this quite a few years ago, and it is updating, but basically everything I've been talking about has been in here. So in conclusion, yacht valuers provide expert unbiased opinion to determine a vessel's fair market value, ensuring fair pricing and informed negotiation. Insurance and provides valuations for coverage of claims and loans, etc. Supporting dispute resolutions, estate planning and tax assessments, helping owners evaluate the financial viability of renovations. So as I said at the very beginning of this, not the most exciting subject, but maybe there's some income streams for you guys to make a little bit more money out. That's about it.